My name is Stewart Rhodes. I'm the founder of Oath Keepers. We all are Americans. We all share a common ground of our Declaration and our Constitution, and in particular our Bill of Rights. That's our common ground. Our mission is simply to use the First Amendment to reach out and remind all active duty military, police, and firefighters of their civic obligation, of their legal duty and responsibilities under Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. The oath is not a good idea or some tradition that we just do. It's a requirement. It's a legal requirement. So our mission is simply to remind them of that oath, of the fact that it is to the law. The oath is to the highest law of the land. In this country, the Constitution reigns, not some man or woman. It's not an oath to an individual. Now, the founders were no dummies. They did this for a good reason. Throughout history, the oath was to the king. Because who owned the country? The king owned the country, right? Divine right of kings. So, of course, the oath was to a person. And even in modern times, even after the fall of monarchy, you had an oath to individuals. The oath in Nazi Germany was to the Fuhrer. You know, the oath was I swear to obey the Fuhrer and give my life for the Fuhrer. Now, why was that? Because in that country, in Nazi Germany, Hitler's word was law. He opened his mouth, law emanated. That's what a dictator is. He dictates just by talking. He opens his mouth, he becomes law. He is the law. He is the nation. So the oath is to him. In this country, in sharp contrast, the oath is to no man, to no woman, to no individual. Now, why is that? Because we live under the rule of law, not of men. That's what a republic is. And it's not a democracy. You look in the Constitution, you'll never see the word democracy used anywhere in there, nor in the Declaration of Independence. It's nowhere to be found. Yes, the government is established by the consent of the people, as the Declaration makes clear, deriving its just powers from their consent. But it's not majority rule. That's what democracy is. Democracy is 51% get to tell the 49% what to do absolutely. No restraints on their power. No limitations. In such a system as that, as Madison pointed out, the minority, whether it be a racial minority, whether it be a cultural or religious minority, or a political minority, the minority is up a creek without a paddle, because the majority can reign over them and tyrannize over them at will in a real democracy. A real democracy is what put Socrates to death. They don't like the way he was talking to the youth. They put him to death by vote. That's what a democracy is. Or as some had said, a democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner. Okay? The minority will always fare worse of any kind in a democracy. That's why the founders set up a constitutional republic. Now, what that means is it's a republic in the sense of representatives and also in the sense of multiple sovereignties coming together, the multiple states. But even above them, when they send someone to Washington, D.C. as a representative, they don't go there and just do what they want. It's not a representative democracy. They don't just rule by majority rule. They pass legislation by majority rule. But what's higher than legislation? The Constitution. So the Constitution is the highest law of the land, not the will of Congress on any vote. If their law that they pass is contrary to the Constitution, as the Supreme Court has said many times, it is null and void, as if never enacted in the first place. A law contrary to the Constitution is null and void, has no force of law. A law that violates freedom of speech, for example. A law that bans criticism of the president, for example, like the Alien and Seditious Acts. And in that turmoil and anxiety over perceived domestic enemies aiding foreign enemies, like we have now, you had anxiety and a desire there to be able to reach out and stop the criticism of political opponents. And they passed the Alien and Seditious Acts, which were a direct violation of the First Amendment, almost immediately after it was enacted. Pretty sad history, frankly. This is what happens in times of trouble and turmoil and fear, is people will react by trying to tear down the constitutional barriers and get at their political opponents. So there's an example right there of a statute that was passed that was in violation, clear violation of the First Amendment. Hopefully, you will have legislatures who won't dare pass such a statute. They should look at every bill and take personal responsibility for making a determination of whether or not that legislation has been proposed, that bill, whether or not it complies with the Constitution. Isn't that correct? Should they make an individual decision about that? And yet, all too often, Congress and other legislatures will defer that decision to the courts. They'll just vote on whatever they think is right, leaving it to the courts to sort out what is constitutional. Now, is that in keeping with their oath? How is that supporting the Constitution of the United States? It's not. So, that's why I started this organization, because I understand, looking at history, that you can't count on the political process to always keep violations from happening, nor can you always count on the courts, as the Alien and Sedition Acts show. This is what happens with courts also during times of emergency. During World War II, you had Korematsu, which was the case that upheld the internment of over 100,000 citizens of the United States of Japanese descent. The court figured out some way to explain away that as being necessary for national survival. Now, where did they get that? Is that in the Constitution? That if the nation's survival is at stake, according to the court, that they can give a pass to something that otherwise would be obviously unconstitutional? No, it's not. There's no escape clause in the Constitution for government to do whatever it thinks it needs to do of any branch, including the judicial branch, whenever they feel like they have to do it. It doesn't exist. But yet, in times of emergency, it happens. As corrupt and rotten as professional politicians are, and as corrupt and rotten as the party leadership is, sad to say, in almost every state on both parties, the rank and file out there, the people of this country, still have principles and are still willing to do what's right. So I looked at that and said, well, holy cow, let's stop worrying about what's going on with these people up here. Let's stop going to the political elites hat in hand, asking them to respect the Constitution, to respect the boundaries, to respect our rights. Instead, let's go around them. Let's ignore them for a while. Well, not entirely, but let's focus our effort on each other, on making sure that we are constitutionalists, making sure that we honor our oaths. And by doing so, whatever they decide they're going to do in their little secret meetings in a smoke-filled room or whatever they're doing, they can't enforce that. They can't put that upon us without our consent. And for too long, people have assumed that the police will just do whatever they're told. They have assumed that the military will just do whatever they're told. Because in our constitutional ignorance, we have forgotten about the oath. A common bond of brotherhood and sisterhood, all willing to give their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. That's what this organization is about, is to heal those divisions, to heal those fears, to break down those false walls, to reunite the American people with their fellow citizens who are police and military, and to reacquaint them with us. Make it very clear to them, we got your back. We support you, so long as you keep your oath. We do want the military and police to keep their oath. We'd like them all to keep their oaths. But the focus on the military and police is precisely because we see the dishonor and the deviousness among politicians and judges who would violate their oaths. And we want to make sure that if they willfully violate their oaths, it won't be the end of our republic. Plain and simple. Okay? Whenever that comes, if that day comes, we want it to be a thing where they go, look, we can't do it. All these people are saying that they're going to keep their oaths. Just keep your oath. And it's not to the 10 orders we will not obey. That's a teaching tool. Those are examples that we think, if you disagree, fine. Just be sincere in your defense. Know the Constitution, and then have the personal integrity and honesty in dealing with each other and everybody else. It's your conduct that's going to matter. Like Washington said, on the eve of the Battle of Long Island, that's the quote we use, he said, the future of this nation, whether Americans will be free, whether their children will be free, depends upon the conduct of this army. That's what he said. Well, for all of us, all the American people, whether our children will be free depends upon our conduct. Not just in capacity as oath keepers or police or military or whatever we are, as Americans. It's our responsibility. So that's why in this organization, the bedrock is goodwill, it's integrity, it's honesty, and it's civility. And we insist upon it. This is what Americans do. They step up. You don't wait for somebody else to do it. You see something that needs to be done, you step up and you do it. And that's our mission here with Oath Keepers, is to make sure that we remind those in service about their obligations under that civic duty.